We're actually a nonprofit organization geared towards educating and empowering youth and young adults to become self-sufficient. Some of our programs include the Youth Entrepreneur Program, Art and Culture Program, as well as a Health and Wellness Program. Some of our events include the Youth Entrepreneur and Leadership Workshop, where we have significant individuals speak to the youth about empowerment as well as educating them. We also have the Healthy for the Holidays event, which is our health and wellness program, where we provide free health screenings, including blood pressure checks, blood glucose, etc. And we also have the Stop the Violence event, where we have significant individuals speak to the youth about counteracting violence.
Thank you very much. I guess I should say good afternoon. It's still early in the holiday day. My name is Larry Williams, and the gentleman introduced me. I'm the executive director for the Kankakee County Tourism Bureau. And what we do is we promote tourism for the county. We promote a lot of the attractions, events, and all the things that visitors enjoy when they come to Kankakee County. I grew up in a small town in Murfreesboro, North Carolina, on the East Coast, and grew up on a tobacco farm and farmed with my family for many years. I moved off the farm when I was 18 years old to attend college, and I attended college first in Philadelphia at an arts design school, and after the first year I couldn't handle a big city because I was a farm boy leaving a small town of 1,100 people, so it was definitely a cultural shock for me. But I remained in North Carolina and graduated with a bachelor's degree in communications and journalism. And it's been very, very rewarding for me as a young African American in our U.S. today. I want to share something with you. Today I'm going to talk about the Big C and conquering life's challenges. And I want to share with you a challenge that I faced 3 years ago, and how I believe some of the things that contributed to my surviving this challenge. I want to share that with you today. But before I do that, I want to share with you something I wrote. When we decide to conquer some of our greatest fears, it can make us better people, help us not take small things for granted, and change our life forever. Facing the fear of cancer can make you become heroic in many ways. Being a survivor brings about hope to many who may feel the need to give up. Today I would like to share with you how I became a survivor and how it recreated my path to a more healthier and spiritual lifestyle. Today I see the world with a new set of eyes. Surviving cancer. There are 4 areas that I'd like to share with you that I believe, as I went through this challenge, it helped me reach the healing point. Surviving cancer, first, to me, being able to hold on to the past. And I'm not talking about things in the past that sometimes cause us to become less than what we are supposed to be in life. But I'm talking about holding on to the past that will create resilience, strength, confidence to challenge anything in life. In my past, and then we'll talk about caregiver before a patient. I was a caregiver before I became a patient. And the irony of that was I lost a relative a year before I was diagnosed. So this was something unknown to my family because we had never experienced cancer with anyone in the past. It was usually heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes were the norm. And I did lose, so I have lost some relatives to those illnesses. The other thing is the diagnosis, how I handled that when I found out that I had cancer. And the last, the healing process. Extended family was something that I experienced in the small town of Murfreesboro, and it never left my life as I grew up. My mother and my father was my best cheerleaders, Ray and Dora Williams. The extended family included a household many times of generations and generations.
Yeah.
It wasn't just my mother and father. I had 4 mothers. I would sometimes have an aunt, sometimes a grandmother, sometimes 2 aunts and an uncle. So I was always surrounded by people who challenged me to be the best. This woman here, 95 years old today, she had no formal education, but she was a fierce 4-H club leader. And she taught all her siblings that leadership was very important starting at a young age. So holding on to past creates resilience and challenge. One of the literary writers that helped me to connect to my culture and my history was a lady who I studied in college. That was Zora Neale Hurston. And the title of the book was Their Eyes Were Watching God. And I'm probably sure you saw the Oprah Winfrey movie, Their Eyes Were Watching God. Now, I'm going to be a critic. I thought the movie was decent. She didn't get a lot of raving reviews. But I think that it went into an area of more of the dark side of spirituality, where conjure and folklore is not always focused on that. And we'll talk about that as I move into past. The fabled Dr. Jim Jordan was my great uncle, my grandmother's brother, who was a pioneer and a very successful businessman in a time when African American men didn't own farmland. He owned over 500 acres of farmland. Now, that may not seem like a lot today, because I know people now, I moved to the Midwest, and I know people own 3,000 acres of land. I'm like, wow, what do you do with all that land? So, but he became a successful businessman, and he became an herbal doctor. So this is what we're going to talk about, is how when I was suffering from cancer, I combined the traditional medicines and herbal medicines. And God, I tell you, it was an experience that I never experienced before. This is my grandmother and her sister. They always stirred up the herbs, and they worked with their brother, and they stirred up all the herbs, and they had people to travel from Connecticut in New York to receive these medications. And the day he died, it was unbelievable. At the church, there were so many cars coming from all over. There were buses coming just because these people would come down to Como, North Carolina, where he lived, and my grandma and all of us grew up. I say Murfreesboro because that was a township. That's where all the merchants were. But I actually grew up in a small town, Como, C-O-M-O. And he owned most of the land in that town. And before he died, he had to sell some of it, but he made sure he maintained enough to create a community for affordable housing for African Americans. And that place is called Bryantville Park, which is where I spent most of my life. And most of the people I lived there, we're still connected. After 30 years, we still write. And you know the wonderful thing? Some small towns you visit, they dilapidate. Yeah. Some communities dilapidate. But the one thing I'm proud of is when I revisit where I grew up, people still have that community pride. Even the young guys who might be standing on the corner, they're going to watch out for the community. They make sure there's no paper. They cut the grass because that was something that we were cultured and taught, and it stayed within generations. So beautification was one of the things that we were proud of. When spring came along, we would sit with our grandmother and mothers and talk about planting gardens and flowers and organic gardening. People think organic gardening is something, organic food is something new. Yeah, it's not new. Right. We've been doing it forever. Yeah. You know, do anyone know what compost is?
Yes.
I know you, Ms. Ford, let's talk about it. What is compost?
Cow manure.
Okay, but how are other ways we can create compost? For fertilizer, and it's created for fertilizer.
Right.
What did you ever hear your parents say scraps?
Yeah.
Take the scraps and put it in the slop jar.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
You know, it was the collards after you shredded them. It was the cabbage after you took the shell leaves out and you threw them all in this compost bucket. And it stayed over and over with leaves and other organic things, and you created compost. So those are things that create health. Organic foods create health. You have right in the backyard of Kankakee County, Pembroke, a community that still embraces those things. And I get excited when I'm visiting Pembroke. And there's a farm, Basu Natural Farm. I went out there to visit, and I couldn't believe some of the herbs that I'll mention to you, like wild stick weed for aches and pains, to prepare boiled weed into a tea people drink. Mullein, which we use today for colds and respiratory ills. Those are things that, I remember my grandmother stirring up in buckets and creating teas. I remember as a child I was playing the superheroes with my brother, and we were in the barn jumping off the loft, and I cut my arm, and it was a huge gash, and the mark is still there. She took, I remember, a pail of rusty nails and some other things she kept bathing the sore with, and it actually came and pulled the skin came together and it healed. It was remarkable. And I never visited a doctor or had any surgery. We didn't have access to that. We lived miles away from doctors. So those are the things we had to rely on.
Right.
Herbal remedies, and I mentioned those earlier. The wild stickweed, mullein, catnip, sage, those are all the herbs that our ancestors used to create herbal remedies. And I was a leader as a young kid. It was natural. I was a drum major, leading a 250-member band. I was excited. And ever since then, I was a real shy kid before I took that though.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be standing in front of people. And it was this professor who said, in order to be a leader, you have to be unafraid. And you have to be able to engage people into whatever it is that you present. Okay? This is my sister who, I'll talk about a caregiver experience. As a caregiver, the middle young lady there was my sister. She died of cervical cancer in 2009. And I remember being a caregiver for her. I spent much time with her, and we talked. And she told me before she died, she said, "Larry, I can't fight this. I'm tired." She said, "I don't want to, I want to live, but it's too painful." And I just sat there and I just said, "Why, Rachel? Why can't you fight?" I said, and that was selfish because I wanted her to stay for us. I was her baby brother, and I love hearing her call me every birthday, January 9th. She called me, it didn't miss her birthday. "Happy birthday, baby brother." So that to me was that was my second mom. So, and she was the oldest of the family. And I remember her telling me all of these things. So it was at the end of her death, June of that same year, I decided to speak for Relay for Life about the life of a caregiver. So I shared those things. But the irony of it was that when at the October 2010, I was diagnosed with Burkitt lymphoma, and it was in 4th stage. And when you can go to the next clip here. This is my first diagnosis on October 2011. I lost lots of weight, well, I didn't have hair anyway, but I didn't worry about that. I'm bald anyway, so I can definitely live with being bald. So, but that was during the diagnosis stage, and I just reflected back to one morning when my sister, I have 3 nurses in the family, and she called me. She found my doctor. She went to work. She said, "You're going to have the best." So I called her at 3 in the morning. I said, "I feel like Rachel." I said, after the second chemo, I had 8 weeks of chemo, and I had to do a whole week each month and be hospitalized because they wanted to do an aggressive chemotherapy. And the second time, I called her at 3 in the morning, and I said, "I can't do this. I know what Rachel was going to now." The side effects was just very, very treacherous. I mean, the bleeding, the constipation. And I said to myself, I said, "Why do I have to go through this for 8 months?" And then I started realizing
that there were herbal medicines that I could combine. And my doctor was great. In the beginning, he didn't want me to do it. He said the first 2 chemos, get through that, let's see how you do, and then you can, start taking the supplements. And I took, and I didn't bring the samples today, but I took a mushroom immune system. I took I drank a liquid that rebuild the white cells. So after that 3rd week of chemo, I was taking it constantly. I started bouncing back immediately after the chemo, and my doctor was saying, "What is going on with you? You're working." Let's go to the next slide. And this is after the healing process, so let's go to the next one. The blending of herbal and medicines. Let's keep going. We talked about that. Cancer drove me to achieve many successes. Through the whole deal, I thought I became unafraid of dying. I said to myself, you know what? If I only live 5 years, if I only have 2 to 5 years to live, I'm going to do everything in my power to be successful and share everything that I can share with people. Because I learned something from this experience. I was not sharing. I was not partnering. God was showing me as I was healing that you need to reach out to people more. You need to share. You need to let people know what's going on and build the community around you by partnering with people that you have had struggles with for the last 3 or 4 years. And I tell you, when that happened, the healing process continued. Let's go to the next slide. And we achieved our organization, and the funny thing is that while I was healing, I did not stop working. I stopped work 1 month. And after that, I continued to work. I had an office set up in the hospital, and I would go in and take my laptop, and I would still stay in communication. Can you keep it? Is it going to? I want to move to the next one. Okay. So we kept moving. This is me in 2011, still working. We won the Von Quilt, Kankakee County, for the state of Illinois. We won the award for the best publication design. You'll see some of your design publications in the bags that you received. And it didn't stop. I said, God, if it's not time for me to go, I won't go. Let's go to the next slide. We said the second year, 2012, we brought home the African American Heritage Campaign, the best marketing campaign in the state of Illinois. And it was centered around the Pembroke Rodeo. It was centered around the Garden Fest, the Herb Fest, everything that was African American, that was culture in Kankakee County. We grasped it and marketed it to our visitors outside areas.